There is a specific moment in an investor's life, a tipping point, where something fundamentally changes. Before this moment, compound interest is your worst enemy. It works against you silently every day. After this moment, it becomes the most powerful force in your financial life. And most people never know exactly where this tipping point is. Today, we are going to identify it together, precisely. And I am going to show you how to position yourself for it as quickly as possible. Welcome! If you're watching this video, it's because something in your relationship with money has already made you ask this question. Is my money really working for me? Or am I still chasing after it? That's the right question. And honestly, it's one of the most important questions you can ask yourself in your financial life. Here's what we'll cover today. First, I'll explain exactly what compound interest is. Not in a boring, academic way, but concretely, using real numbers that might shock you. Next, I'll show you how compound interest works against you in certain everyday situations. Then, we will identify this famous tipping point together, the exact moment when everything changes. After that, we'll look at a case study, a real-life story that perfectly illustrates how two people with similar incomes can end up in radically different financial situations at age 60, simply because of this concept. And finally, I'll give you an actionable framework with clear steps you can start implementing right now. Stick around until the end, because the part about investor psychology is the one most people never see coming, and it's often what makes all the difference. Let's start with the basics, but in a way that will really stick with you. Albert Einstein supposedly said that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. This quote, whether true or merely attributed to him, captures something essential. Compound interest is simply earning interest on your interest. Your return is reinvested, which then generates its own return, and then that new return is reinvested again, and so on, indefinitely. It sounds simple, almost too simple. So why do so few people actually benefit from it? Because compound interest is counterintuitive. Our brains are wired to think linearly. If you save $100 a month for 30 years, your brain instinctively calculates 100 times 360 months equals $36,000, right? No, wrong. With an average annual return of 8%, the approximate historical long-term return of the S&P 500, those same $100 a month for 30 years become about $150,000, not $36,000. $150,000. That's 4 times more than what your linear brain would have calculated. That is the real power of compound interest. But here is what most people fail to understand. During the first few years, it doesn't look like much. It might even feel like a disappointment. In the first year, the $1,200 you saved monthly might have generated around $50 in actual interest. Insignificant. The second year, maybe $200. Still not impressive, and that's where a lot of people give up, because they don't see immediate results. What they don't realize is that they are still in the phase where compound interest is silently accumulating, building its foundation, while the tipping point is approaching, but they don't know it. Before we talk about the moment it works for you, you absolutely must understand when it works against you, because for many people, that is exactly their current situation. Compound interest doesn't discriminate. It is just as relentless in destroying wealth as it is in creating it. And big banks, credit card companies, and auto lenders know this very well. It's their business model. Let's look at a standard credit card in the United States. The average annual interest rate on American credit cards is around 20 to 22%. Imagine you have a $5,000 balance on your card. You pay the minimum every month, let's say $100. You think you'll gradually climb your way out. But at 21% interest, you're paying about $87 in interest that first month. Yet this means only $13 will actually reduce your principal debt, and the following month, interest is calculated on $4,987, not much less. This cycle lasts not for a few months but for years. You will be paying off this debt for more than 20 years if you only make the minimum payments. And in the end, you will have paid over $12,000 for an original debt of $5,000. That is compound interest working against you ferociously. And it's not just credit cards. It's high-rate student loans that accrue for years without being paid down. Auto loans that capitalize their interest. The consumer credit that big box stores offer you with interest rates hidden in the fine print. All these mechanisms use the exact same math that investors use to build their wealth. The only difference? In these cases, it's your money flowing to someone else, not yours growing for you. So here is the first big lesson. Before you even think about making compound interest work for you, it is imperative to identify where it's working against you and put a stop to it as quickly as possible. Now here is what you've really been waiting for. The exact moment, the tipping point. There isn't just one single answer because there are actually 3 dimensions to this tipping point, and you need to understand all 3 of them. The first dimension, the mathematical dimension. Mathematically, compound interest really starts working for you when your annual returns exceed your annual contributions. In other words, when your money generates more than what you are putting in yourself. With an investment portfolio yielding an 8% annual return, this point occurs when your capital reaches about 12 to 13 times your annual contribution. If you invest $10,000 a year, it's when your portfolio reaches $120,000 to $130,000. At this stage, the market is adding more to your wealth than you are adding yourself. This is the first signal that something has fundamentally changed. But there is a second dimension, which is even more powerful. The second dimension, the exponential curve. You may have heard of the rule of 72. It's a simple but eye-opening tool. Divide 72 by your annual rate of return, and you get the number of years it takes for your money to double. At 8%, your money doubles every 9 years. At 10%, every 7 years. Here is what's remarkable. The first doubling takes 9 years. The second doubling also takes 9 years. But after the third doubling, after 27 years, your capital is 8 times your initial investment. And every subsequent doubling is numerically much larger than the previous one, even though it takes the exact same amount of time. A $10,000 portfolio that doubles becomes $20,000, then $40,000, then $80,000, then $160,000. The difference between the fourth and fifth doubling is $80,000. Between the first and second, it was only $10,000. Same time frame, radically different result. The tipping point in this dimension is when you enter these late-stage doublings. It's when the exponential curve really starts to steepen. The third dimension, the psychological. And this is the one people underestimate the most. The real tipping point is often psychological before it is mathematical. It's the moment when you truly believe your money is working for you. When you no longer check your balance every day with anxiety, but rather with confidence. When market corrections no longer panic you, because you understand that short-term volatility is the price of admission for long-term growth. This mental shift, this deep conviction, is often what allows investors to stay in the game long enough for the math to do its job. Let me tell you a story. It illustrates everything we've just talked about, and it will probably hit close to home. Imagine 2 young professionals. Let's call them Sophie and Marcus. They are both 25 years old. They both just graduated from college. They both land an entry-level job making $55,000 a year. Same starting point, nearly identical. Sophie starts investing immediately. She puts $300 a month into an index fund tracking the S&P 500. She doesn't have much, but she is disciplined. She automates her investments. She doesn't even think about each transfer. It goes out automatically on the first of the month. She maintains this habit for 15 years, then stops entirely at age 40 and doesn't touch a thing until she turns 65. Marcus, on the other hand, thinks he has time. He tells himself he'll start when he has a more comfortable salary. He has student loans, a car to finance, soon an apartment, and then another car. The expenses pile up, and they keep coming. He finally starts investing at age 40, exactly when Sophie stops. He invests $600 a month, twice as much as Sophie for the next 25 years until he's 65. Here are the results. I'm assuming an average annual return rate of 8%. Sophie invested for 15 years. Total contribution of $54,000. Value at age 65, roughly $710,000. Marcus invested for 25 years. Total contribution of $180,000. Value at age 65, roughly $570,000. Let's pause here, because this deserves to truly sink in. Marcus invested 3 times as much money as Sophie over a longer period of time, with monthly contributions that were twice as high. And yet Sophie has more money at retirement. Why? Because Sophie started at 25. Because her investments had 40 years to grow instead of 25. Because she went through several additional doublings. Because compound interest worked for her for much longer. The tipping point for Sophie happened somewhere around age 38 to 42, even though she had stopped investing. Her capital had reached critical mass. It was generating returns greater than what any reasonable monthly contribution could have added. The money worked for her, even while she slept, even while she was on vacation, even after she stopped contributing. The lesson of this story isn't invest early and stop. The lesson is time in the market is your most valuable asset, much more valuable than the amount invested, much more valuable than picking the perfect investment. Marcus made the mistake millions of people make every year. He optimized for immediate comfort rather than future freedom. He let compound interest work against him during his debt phase, and then he started making it work for him too late to fully benefit from the exponential curve. I want to talk now about something rarely discussed in financial videos, because we prefer to talk about rates of return, diversification, and asset allocation. But psychology is often the determining factor, and this is where most people sabotage their own success. There is a cognitive bias called present bias. Our brain places a much higher value on what is available now than on what will be available in the future. It's evolutionary programming. Our ancestors needed resources right now to survive. But in the modern financial world, this programming is destructive. It pushes us to spend today rather than save for tomorrow. It makes us sell during a market correction because the pain of immediate loss is more intense than the abstract vision of future gain. It makes us perceive $10,000 today as more valuable than $50,000 in 15 years, even if mathematically the future $50,000 represents a better decision. The investors who reach the tipping point, the ones for whom compound interest actually works, have found a way to neutralize this bias. Not eliminate it, but bypass it. How? Primarily through automation. When you automate your investments, you remove the decision from the equation. Your brain no longer has to choose between spending and investing every month. The decision was made once and it repeats automatically. You eliminate the psychological enemy before it even appears. There's also what we call resistance to market corrections. Historically, the S&P 500 has experienced a correction of over 10% about once a year on average, a bear market of more than 20% roughly every 6 to 7 years. These moments are psychologically painful. Watching your portfolio lose 20, 30, sometimes 40% of its value in a few months is emotionally difficult, even if you intellectually understand that it's part of the cycle. Investors who have been through several of these cycles and stayed the course have developed what you could call psychological immunity. They have seen the market drop. They have seen the market recover. They no longer panic. And this immunity is often the true psychological tipping point, because the worst financial decisions are made in moments of panic. Selling at the bottom of a bear cycle, then missing the recovery because you're waiting to see if it stabilizes. It is exactly the opposite of what you should do, and yet millions of investors do it during every crisis. Warren Buffett expressed this idea simply. The stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. This patience, this ability to stay disciplined during difficult cycles, is a skill that gets developed. And those who master it are the ones for whom compound interest works most powerfully. Now let's move on to concrete action. Because an educational video without an action plan is like a map without a destination. Here is the 5-step framework to reach your tipping point as quickly as possible. Step 1. Eliminate the interest working against you. Before you invest heavily, tackle your high-interest debt. Any debt with over a 7 to 8% annual interest rate is an absolute priority. Credit cards, high-rate personal loans, liquidate them methodically. No market investment reliably outpaces a liability compounding at 20% interest. Step 2. Start now, even if it's modest. Compound interest's number one enemy is waiting. As we saw with Sophie and Marcus, every lost year costs infinitely more than what your brain calculates. $50 a month invested at 25 is worth more than $500 a month invested at 45 in terms of compounding time. If you're in the United States, first max out your 401k up to your employer's match limit. That's an instant 50 to 100% return on that portion. No investment can compete with that. Next, max out your Roth IRA if you are eligible. Step 3. Automate everything. Set up automatic transfers for your investments on payday. Not the day after, not when you remember to do it, on payday. Pay yourself first. As the fundamental principle of personal finance states, treat your monthly investment as a fixed bill, just as non-negotiable as your rent. Step 4. Stay the course during corrections. When the market drops, and it will drop, resist the urge to sell. If possible, take advantage of it to buy more. Corrections are sales on quality assets. Long-term investors who bought during the 2008 financial crisis or during the March 2020 crash saw their positions multiply by significant factors in the years that followed. The golden rule: never make a major investment decision in an intense emotional state, neither in the panic of a downturn nor in the euphoria of a rally. Cold, methodical discipline is your best strategy. Step 5. Let time do its job. Once you have the right foundation in place, eliminating costly debt, automating investments into diversified vehicles like low-cost index ETFs, and applying psychological discipline, your main role becomes not interfering. Don't react impulsively to every financial news headline. Don't over-rebalance your portfolio. Don't chase past performance. Time is your greatest ally. Let it work. Let's recap the essential points of this video. Compound interest is a neutral force. It doesn't pick sides. It simply amplifies what is already there, whether it's your assets or your debts. The first step is always to identify which side of this equation you are on. The mathematical tipping point occurs when your annual returns exceed your annual contributions. Generally, when your capital reaches about 12 to 13 times your annual contribution at an 8% return. The exponential curve of compound interest only becomes truly spectacular after many years. The first doublings seem insignificant. The final ones are transformative. Psychology is often the limiting factor, not strategy. Automating, staying disciplined during corrections, and developing emotional resilience are skills just as important as picking the right investments. And finally, the story of Sophie and Marcus teaches us that time is your most valuable asset, not the amount invested. The most impactful decision you can make is to start now. No matter where you are in your financial journey today, whether you have $50 a month or $500, whether you have debts to pay off or are just starting your capital, direction matters more than speed. And every day you wait is a lost day of compounding that you can never get back. There you have it. You now have a clear understanding of this tipping point that so few people truly know about. And most importantly, you have a concrete framework to get there. If this video brought you value, share it with someone in your circle who needs to hear it, because these concepts change life trajectories, not just portfolios. And if you want to go deeper into long-term wealth building, asset allocation strategies, or understanding how the best investors actually think, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We have a lot more high-level content coming your way. See you very soon.